Good evening, good evening, good evening. It's your girl AJ, the Suburban Princess, for another edition of Birds of a Feather. This is episode 8, but I think this will have to take a 2-part podcast simply because there are so many things I want to talk about, but I don't want to overspeak my 30 minutes. So I'm just going to start by talking about the obvious good news that has been going on, and that is my 4-1 Eagles. Bird Gang, shout out. Thank you, birds, for proving me wrong. I really seriously thought this was going to be a knock 'em, sock 'em, drag it out fight. I didn't think the Cardinals were that great, but I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, he's a wonderful wide receiver. I really just thought maybe even the other wide receivers that I couldn't even name at the time until the one that got the touchdown, John Brown. I know I'd heard his name before, but I had forgotten. They didn't have David Johnson, so I thought they may have a better chance of stopping the run, obviously, because there wouldn't be one. But it looks like it really didn't have to be an issue of stopping the run. It was whether or not the Cardinals' defense could stop the Eagles' offense, because Carson and the boys went off. And I'm very excited in general now because this week they're going to face Carolina for the Thursday night game. I think it's going to be more exciting now to see because week by week it gets more exciting to watch Carson and the boys get into a flow. I mean, LeGarrette Blount is now very, very comfortable, obviously, finding his lane. And he actually could have got a touchdown at one point during that one play if he'd have just turned up a little bit more. But him, Corey Clement, my boy returned from the dead, Kenyon Barner. Thank God. I mean, I'm not happy that Sproles is injured because that's the only reason why we didn't have Barner anymore was because we had too many running backs at one point. And now that Sproles is on IR, Barner was always a burner. Last season when he was introduced to us, he was very good in preseason and he continued to be, but then it got to the issue where the Eagles had to use all their horses and then keep the veteran. So Barner just kind of got the short end of the stick, but now you're seeing homeboy ripped off a punt return and pretty much would have been gone had he not just gotten to that last couple yards and petered out on the sidelines. But he ran like somebody had stole his lunch money. And I've always liked Kenyon Barner, so I was so happy when they brought him back. It turns out that he at the time was, I don't know if he was on the sidelines or coming off the bench when he was playing for the Chargers. And I don't even know if he even saw any time, but I think it's a blessing when they decide to not just let a player just hang around on the practice squad when they know they're better than that. It's good that they let him go so that he could actually find out the opportunities, but I'm actually kind of glad he was still there so that they could bring him back. It's been a blessing in these last couple games, especially it's always good to know the home team can play at home because for a while last year, it seemed like every other week we had questions of whether or not they could score better away from home or at home at all. They've already exceeded expectations from what last year was when Carson was still a rookie. And now it's just a matter of people staying healthy. I mean, hopefully Fletcher Cox will be back, but I don't think it will obviously be in time for the Panthers game. And now Lane Johnson is now an issue because he's in concussion protocol. So it doesn't look like he'll be well enough or he shouldn't be well enough to be rushed to play for a Thursday game when they know they're about to play a Monday nighter as well. So I think all in all, you can't really complain. I think everybody got a little. Nelson Aguilar got revived from the dead. Speaking of people from the dead, I mean, Nelly did prove that he had a great offseason, but how many times have you heard players have a great offseason and still not do crap when it comes down to, games that count? I'm glad that he allowed himself to just relax, fall into line, do all the necessary drills that he had to do. Obviously, Nelson Aguilar is a man that really prides himself on improvement, and he wasn't going to give up. And I'm glad he didn't because I was one of the many who really gave up on him. You felt like every other game was every time he had an opportunity to redeem himself last year, it just never worked. So I think this time he even did his little dive into the end zone, his back dive into the end zone, just like Deshaun did a long time ago. And I think it was a great tribute. Some people actually had the nerve to have a problem with it and label it disrespectful, which I think was actually coming from T.O., But I think it was a great tribute, and I'm glad that he actually acknowledged that he did it to as a nod to Deshaun, because he always used to watch him, and that's great, because that's what Deshaun was always about, the flash. And even though at times it seemed like it was a little extra, he always had a West Coast swag that was badly needed on the team at the time. And so for Nelly to get even to that point where he's even doing that is showing that he's obviously worked on his confidence, as well as he's connecting more with catching the ball, obviously, and then also just keeping his body in shape. So if he's proving to anybody and any of the haters is that he's not going to give up. And if anything, he's a testament to show you why you should never listen to outside Twitter people who don't work in the NFL, annoying, rude fans. But you know what you get when you come to Philly. So you shouldn't be thin-skinned to think that everything that we say is going to be etched in stone, because as soon as you show and prove, we shut up. So I, for one, wasn't a fan for a minute, but I kind of tried not to hate on Nelson too long, because I had met him before he actually played at a fundraiser, and I really thought he was such a nice, down-to-earth dude. And most of the Eagle players generally are, so I really don't really take it to heart when they do really poorly. But there's a point where there's so many games that they had opportunities to last year that were squandered, and it wasn't just certain players, it was the whole team. But there's something about watching somebody come from the doldrums and rise like the phoenix from the ashes that is such a welcome change. It just shows you that things in life are only temporary. All the downs in life are only temporary. And it's good to see any kind of player redeem himself and still obviously stay on the team. And plus, the reality is it was too expensive to cut him anyway, because he was a number 1 pick. So that wasn't going to happen no matter what we said last year. But I digress. But all in all, it was great. I kind of wanted to see Mac Hollins get into the end zone, but I was very proud of Zach Ertz, my dear Ertz, redeeming himself, even looking a little cocky. I kind of liked it. And it just shows me that, again, he's another one. I thought he had been in the team longer. This is his 5th season. And he's really taken the time to stay healthy and get himself on a whole nother outlook as well. And I was glad to read an article online that basically said that he's doing all these natural, like yoga. He's doing a lot of stuff to keep himself fit, to keep his mind right. He gets a lot of positive influence, obviously, from Carson, because Carson is a very stoic man of faith, and without being too overly preachy. And I feel like maybe that was also part of the energy change with these guys in the group. I think not only just because of the faith thing, but just because I think they all just, like Doug Peterson just said today, that they all really believe in each other. And it's amazing what happens when there's no I in team. And it's amazing when people are not on two different sides. And when you actually play as a team, it actually shows positive results. And it takes a lot. I mean, minus all the outside, world and Twitter and us fans, and our flaky ways. If you get the core right, if you you trust each other as a team and you trust your coach, no matter what we all nitpick at Doug for, the world is your oyster and the sky is the limit. And so for these birds to be 4-1 in the division, with the Giants taking a hard L with OBJ getting injured really badly and out for the season, you have to be thankful in a way that they didn't listen to us. They didn't listen to any of the negative criticism, and they just all went internally and said, we're going to be better. We're just going to have to show and prove. And that is exactly why they're on the top of the NFC East. And I really, really hope that they stay on top and that, Dallas doesn't have a resurgence. But I think Dallas is secretly imploding too. The Redskins, I don't know. I never trust the Redskins because you always think that they're down and then they all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're right behind us. So I would keep an eye on the Cowboys and the Redskins, but the Giants are pretty much done. I mean, they're 0-5, so even if they do return, no one's going to care. By the time that, the Eagles even get to like end of October, early November, the Giants won't be a factor. But they got a lot of issues. They might have to get rid of their coach. Maybe it's time for Eli to hang it up. He has 2 rings. It's not like he hasn't ever won anything. I just think this is the Eagles' year to kind of build on this foundation so that hopefully next year they can really be playoff bound. I know everybody's talking about playoffs now. I'm not convinced until December. Like I said, my goal has always been, since I even started working at the Link, was to work a postseason. But I don't get my hopes up just because they're doing well in going into week 6. I just really am glad to see fun football back. So I'm hoping that this continues. Meanwhile, they got to face Cam and company, and Cam's been on a roll too, so we'll see what happens. It could, if they do lose this game Thursday, I understand because it's a short week, but I'm just hoping that they continue the momentum, at least show up, and don't let McCaffrey and all those guys, come and run over the team just because it's an away and just because it's right after the Sunday game. I hope that, if anything, we get some of the other guys that are on the bench come out and maybe give the other guys a little rest for this game since it's not a divisional game. But I don't know. Yeah, I totally see them, out of the 9 games up until the bye, I'll say they go 6-3. If they do better than that, I'm totally, like I said, totally okay with it. But 6-3 to me is not unrealistic. They are playing the Broncos, and the Broncos, somehow managed to get stuff done. They have a very, very, very strong defense, so they scare me just a tad. So there's still a couple games that, I wouldn't be shocked if they took L's. So, but yeah, I say 6-3 before the bye, and I still think that's good. So, a lot to look forward to. Carson especially is starting to get a flow. He seemed to connect a lot more on his throws. Yes, there was that interception in the end zone that looked a little questionable, but I really do think that he is slowly starting to see the difference in why getting his technique was really important. I think that he throws smoother. He still probably lets stuff get, sail over, but for the most part, he pretty much threw a deep ball more than once that worked very well, obviously. It looked nice when Torrey got his deep ball, and it looked very nice when Nelson Agholor got his as well. So I think that hopefully Carson will continue this and start to just not force things, not have to take a sack too much, and not feel like he has to run all the time. I mean, he should only really have to run first down like once or twice max per game. I know that he can run, but we don't want him to run too much because we don't want him to be the quarterback that Donovan was and then end up working himself, into a major injury. So I would rather he let all the other running backs do the running and just he get out of the pocket every now and then just to get that little short yardage. But I'm just glad he's starting to get comfortable in the pocket. And I do obviously think that Wisniewski obviously helped protect his blind side. I don't know why they're still switching to the Chance Warmack guy, but maybe they're just trying to make him feel more confident the more that the reps they give him. And we'll also see how that works once Lane's out to see. And thank God it's not going to be longer than usually what it is. Although, concussion protocol, you really should be out for at least a couple weeks just to get yourself back together. But I have a weird feeling that Lane will be back after this week. So he might be ready for the Redskin game. But on a side note, even after all this great positive news, there's been a lot of negative developments in the sports world regarding women once again. It doesn't seem like it was enough for women to get criticized for being involved in the sports world, and then Cam Newton coming out and criticizing a reporter without really criticizing her per se, other than being shocked her asking a sports question like it's a new concept. And he has since apologized, and he has since realized the error of his ways. But now we have, once again, another corporation sidestepping and backtracking on their promise to, I guess, be open to women and diversity. ESPN has now decided to sideline Jemele Hill for a tweet-related incident for 2 weeks because they felt like her tweet incited kind of a warfare towards owners, specifically Jerry Jones, who decided recently to go back to his stance of if any player doesn't stand for the anthem, they won't play. And she decided to give out a tweet and offer that if you want to be upset or you want to boycott Jerry Jones's stance, then you should protest the, organizations that pay him, basically. or all his sponsors. And so I guess ESPN felt like that was inflammatory because, I'm sure Jerry Jones is a huge fixture, obviously, in the NFL world, as well as obviously at this year, he was officially called a Hall of Famer. So I guess they felt that was inflammatory enough to sideline her for 2 weeks. But you know how this goes. I don't see her or Michael Smith continuing with the SC6 at this point, because I feel like she did it just to continue her stance of saying, I'm going to not be apologetic about my views regarding racial injustice, as well as, sexual injustice, towards women, sexual roles regarding women in politics and journalism. There shouldn't be any issues with that. I think she stands as a woman on top of being a black female, especially with Twitter, not being afraid to face all her faceless criticism from random people who decide to hide behind eggs and not show their faces, but call her names. And I've seen most of the insults that she addresses. I think that ESPN felt like it could lead to more things, since they didn't decide to suspend her after calling the president a white supremacist on her Twitter feed. So the question remains, with all these issues with women, especially I guess people consider mouthy women, and the state of politics the way it is, with the government pulling out of backing Planned Parenthood, and basically the government now in this position where they don't want to spend money to help people, I guess, become dependent on certain things like healthcare, and all the issues that do affect women, the gender wage gap that's still an issue, and the whole minimum wage thing. We're in a dangerous era where if you speak too much in such a way that I guess generates open discussion and open criticism towards a corporation that prides itself on not dealing with it unless it's in their own little box of something called diversity and only allowing people to speak but so much when it comes to crossing the lines of sports and politics, you really don't have as much support from the corporations as much as you might think you do. I think Jemele just used her platform the best way she could. I don't think Twitter should really come down to losing your job as much as just open-faced on TV, just saying straight out, like, I think my president sucks and he's a racist Nazi. I understand that. But Twitter should be your own public space, your own public forum. And as long as you're not blatantly saying that my company gets their money or their funds from a white supremacist, that's totally different. That would be inflammatory. But if you're speaking your own views in such a way that you're basing it on what you are responding to, as far as another Twitter person coming out about an issue and then you addressing it, that alone should not get you fired. Now, if you did speak on something directly that does say ESPN pays me to not have a peace of mind, or does not pay me to have conflicts with random people on Twitter, I still don't see the issue. But this seems like it was just an excuse to get rid of her because they regretted not doing it sooner. So it just seemed like it came out of nowhere, because I hadn't seen anything from her that even remotely sparked any kind of protest. And then with now on the heels of the vice president deciding to show up to a random NFL game and then leaving once he saw players kneel, which obviously was a fixed publicity stunt just to have the nerve to say something and divert attention to them. It just seems like there's a lot of backpedaling and there's a lot of turncoating, and it's a really annoying concept, but it's also a slippery slope, because yes, they employ you, they pay you, they don't pay you to make them look stupid. They can do that all by themselves, basically. It's just sad because ESPN does, get, the backing of Disney and all these huge corporations, but they also will only do controversial their way. They won't allow someone else to do it. And, Jemele had her own show with Michael Smith back when it was His and Hers a couple years ago. And SC6 was supposed to be their next step into prime time and into the whole arena where social media has become the main forum for most sports athletes. And just in general, They have funny local moments. They would highlight a lot of football and sports from all over the world, from just 9 to 5, households and just kids coming out of college, kids in high school, kids who were fans of them, kids who were fans of anybody. And they spotlight everybody. So it's not even just like the big celebrity journalists or celebrity athletes. It's just everybody. And I think it's a fun hour to get away from kind of like the politicky, boring, generic stuff that ESPN always puts out there. Hence the reason why I think they started having a women's division and, a sports channel for programming and stuff like that. And they started branching out and doing all these other things. And so SC6 became that other extension of it, especially because His and Hers became a very steady fixture and Jemele was starting to get a lot more press. So I think they felt like they should capitalize on her and her very strong, not necessarily always political, but strong-minded, charismatic views on sports as well as life. And I think she and Michael have great chemistry, so obviously it made sense to put them as the new host. Now, mind you, those who are just also used to just watching boring SportsCenter didn't like the fact that it just seemed very black, how they did the whole show, especially when they decided to switch the intros a couple times to like a mock Golden Girls and then a mock A Different World, which was really cool, but it was, I guess, too different for some, so some people just felt very uncomfortable with it. Now, mind you, it's only on for a freaking hour, but yet it did, and I've seen it generate a lot of outrage from some people who normally watch it and just like their boring SportsCenter. But it's, it's a metaphor for life. I mean, anything that's changed kind of it's not always welcomed. And I, for one, today have experienced that kind of run in with wanting to fight with change and having an attitude because, the way I always knew things to be done in a workplace, has now flipped. And I'm not a fan of being micromanaged. So I'm sure Jemele looked at it like, I'm not going to be told that I can say this and I can say that. You either ride with me or you let me go. And, I pretty much don't expect the show to still last at this point. I kind of look at that 2 weeks as their way of saying, well, we could fire you, but I think you need to take time to think about yourself. And the way they did that, my mother got pushed out of her job. They gave her 2 weeks to come back and then, I guess, play along. And my mom wasn't going to do that. So I always find that when people give you 2 weeks to just take a vacation, it's basically saying we're going to fire you. So I guess that's why I felt extra strong about talking about it, because I don't like it when you want to have your black folk or your black faces on a national network speak only about certain things. But then when it comes to actually speaking the truth, you have a problem with it, and it's no different from how I feel about, I guess, higher ups in general. It's just, why do we have to play your game when you really don't have anything in common with what I'm saying? But if it makes you look bad, then you don't want anything to do with it. But if it makes you look good, you're all in. And usually that always trickles down when it comes to the hierarchy and corporations and, people who are have and have nots, that whole level is so stupid. That whole, everybody's the same. It's just that some people get paid for not doing anything and some people don't get paid anything for doing a lot. So I've never agreed with the whole corporate structure. I've always had a problem with it. I'm too mouthy a lot for a lot of people who are higher ups, and it's cost me a position at my part-time job at The Link, but it didn't cost me my whole entire job. I felt like I was very good at a certain position that involved dealing with fans directly. And one of the guys who was head of it at the time, when it was kind of like still a fledgling idea, I guess he felt like I wasn't falling in line. So he decided to do away with me and a couple of my coworkers and kind of revamp the whole department, so that the following year I was kind of ushered into a new role without even really having a say in it. So I always felt like that sort of meant like, you're a little bit of a troublemaker, so we're not going to fire you because you obviously do what you do well, but just not well enough under these circumstances. And I guess I should have been happy, and in the long run it did work out, but it still kind of annoys me because I felt like I did my job very well. I just didn't play the rules he wanted to, but I basically felt like I did my job. And maybe in a way, I kind of look back at it now, maybe I did kind of undermine him a little, but it was only because the whole job required our input and I was giving mine. So I guess it's just how you say it type of thing. I mean, maybe even if in this age of Twitter, you feel like what I say on my Twitter is one thing and what I do at my job is another. But some people feel like what you put out is all you. And so if this is what you represent, then it's too much trouble for us to deal with. So we'd like you to do it on your own time and not on our clock. So regardless of whatever happens with Jemele Hill, I do believe it'll give her a little bit of a vantage point, should I say, because I think that she'll find another way to put her platform and her perspective out there in a healthy way. But it's not going to go without a period of, does she play the role? Does she dance the dance with ESPN and go back? Or does she just look at this as a springboard to something better? Granted, it's not going to have that kind of a paycheck probably as ESPN, but then again, that's what they want you to think. And sometimes it's not always the case. I mean, you never know what she's been doing all this time up until this started becoming an issue. She could have been secretly putting money away, secretly making alliances with people who would have her back as soon as she did get the boot. She obviously is not one of these people that likes to be loud about it, but she's also not one of these people that's going to hide behind the truth. What's out there is what's out there. And if you have ever watched the show SC6, you know that her and Michael are never shy about their opinions, especially when it comes to their own and defending Black folk and humans in general. Especially when right is right and wrong is wrong. So I say all that to say, especially on the show tonight on Birds of a Feather, I do feel like we're all the same in the sense we all want to be better. But there are some people that always just can't deal with the fact that there are people who may be smarter than him, may have more to say, may have a little bit more power. But instead of trying to work with them, they try to put them down or squash them or belittle them. And I always hate that because I'm the type of person like you should always help people instead of trying to control them or putting them down another level to make yourself feel good. I'm not a fan of the have and the have-nots. I feel like we should all be working towards the same goal, to make more money, to be healthy, to take care of ourselves, be stable, happy people. I would never want to trip over somebody just to get to somewhere else. And I've been experiencing a lot on not only just my full-time job, but my part-time job. And I never think that stuff is worth it. I've never been a brown noser. Yes, I've had a mouth, and yes, it's got me in trouble, but I always feel like I can't sleep at night not saying what I have to say. Whether or not it makes sense, whether or not it's rational, I just can't deal with not letting myself speak. I feel like maybe that's why I've never liked belts as a child. I've never liked slips. I've never liked stuff that holds me down. Like anything that restricts me pisses me off. And it's just kind of almost a way like a rubber band, just like snapping back. And there are times that there's a time and a place for everything. I agree. But there's also, where else are you going to get that platform to say everything and then get your point across to a lot more people? And I think with Jemele, it just serves the purpose to show that it's not only hard to stay relevant in the sports world as a woman, but as a Black woman, especially a Black woman that I guess doesn't feel that stereotypical westernized ideal of pretty. Some people look at it that way. Some people feel like, maybe she doesn't look like all the other females that are on ESPN. So it's very easy to come down on her. I personally think she's always really been a very attractive person. And I think also it just helps that she can speak well and she doesn't ever sound stupid. And I just think that when you're strong like that, it is always scary to people who have never or refuse to look at Black women as intelligent. Especially in the sports world where there's so many men now that have decided to go against the grain and openly say, like, I don't like women in sports. I don't like women reporters. It's just it's not a woman thing. Meanwhile, you got all these women, blazing trails and getting awards and winning medals. But it's not a woman thing to freaking broadcast a freaking football game that barely anybody's really watching. Anyway, I digress. It was a lot to say, and it was not a lot of time to say it, but even though I stumble on my words through this podcast, I do it because I have stuff on my heart that I need to get off. And I know in no other way or form am I going to really be able to do that except for this app. So thank God for apps. Thank God for YouTube, because there's a lot of us who obviously feel like we don't get heard. So if it wasn't for YouTube and if it wasn't for any of these apps that allow us to create our own kind of space, I don't know if this world would be any more worse than it already is. I feel like as a human race, we're all kind of crying out for some kind of recognition, respect. And I think that stuff like this that happens is unfortunate because it reminds you that there are people out there who don't really care about equality. They just care about posturing and making money. And capitalism in the United States will always be king, no matter what. So God forbid you have humanity. God forbid you have integrity. It doesn't pay the bills these days. So it's sad to say, but as I wrap this up, I do want to stress that Birds of a Feather will not just focus on the Eagles. I'd like to focus on issues that really rub me the wrong way or make me want to sing and dance and celebrate. And, well, never forget also too, we're also in the middle of a Sixers preseason. They're actually playing Celtics tonight, which I might go peep that. But I wanted to celebrate my birds. And I also wanted to speak as a woman, an African-American woman who has a view. And I want to thank any of you who are listening to this. If you feel the need to agree or vent, you can always throw a comment on my Twitter, which is girlyvirgo78. My AOL is ajradiocaller@aol.com. And what else do I have to plug? My Facebook page is AJ the Sports Radio Caller. And what else? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, Instagram, AJ Radio Caller. And, you know, throw me a line. If you're not a fan of hearing about politics either, say that. You know, it's not going to stop. I mean, we're in a world now where we feel like we're being oppressed by a man who has no clue how to deal with other people outside of his circle. So it's never going to stop now. Everybody feels the need to express themselves because they've been held down and it's becoming more exposed. So those who are uncomfortable, just get used to being uncomfortable. Well, it'll pass. Trouble don't last always, as the song will always say. Anyway, I digress. You guys have a great night. Thank you for listening. AJ, your suburban princess. I'll be back with another edition of Birds of a Feather, especially after Thursday's game. So we're going to get 2 episodes in 1 week. But for now, have a great night. Bird Gang for life. Take it easy. See you later.